People should know when they're conquered.
Would you, Quintus? Would I?
The year is 1944. You're camped in some small town behind enemy lines. After fighting your way through the Jerrys, you're tired, you're scared, and most of all, you're hungry. But you take solace in the fact that you have 3 square meals a day, all of which include the nutrients you need in a miraculous tin can that can last for months. No refrigeration required.
It's a single-celled protein combined with synthetic aminos, vitamins, and minerals. Everything the body needs.
Not quite. It's Spam, the multicultural blockbuster food that's become a staple in places like Hawaii and South Korea, but has become the face of the most hated food in history by health regulatory bodies: processed meat. Spam was created by J. Hormel in 1937 as a way to sell more pork shoulder, a cut of meat that no one was buying at the time. To understand our unique relationship to processing meat as a species, we'll have to go back in time. First, we'll go to 1927. J. Hormel's father founded Hormel Foods after learning that German meat companies were processing and canning entire hams for sale to the public. But the history of processing meat goes way back in history and gave rise to famous meats like charcuterie, beef jerky, Iberico ham, chorizo sausage, hot dogs, and much more. Later on in this episode, we'll explore the significance of Europe and the evolution of meat processing. The origin of the name Spam was known only to the people who invented it. Some speculate that it stands for spiced ham, a previous product by Hormel Foods that didn't actually contain any spice or any ham. Spam could also stand for shoulder of pork and ham, since it's made primarily of pork shoulder with some ham. Unfortunately, the truth is that we'll probably never know the true reason behind the name. Loved by some and hated by others, although it provided essential vitamins, minerals, and amino acids in addition to protein and fat, Spam itself quickly became the most polarized item in history. Despite feeding over 133 million cans to US soldiers in World War II, Hormel received hate mail saying that Spam was meatloaf without basic training, special army meat, ham that didn't pass basic training, and far worse insults that Hormel wouldn't repeat. After the war, Spam was considered a food of the lower class in the United States and the UK, which fed into its negative reputation. At the same time, it became a staple food in places where the US military was stationed, like Hawaii, the Philippines, and South Korea. Speaking of South Korea, it's almost the Lunar New Year, and it's actually a thing here to give your friends, family, or co-workers gift packs full of Spam, canned tuna, or seed oils around this time of year. Let me know what you think about this tradition in the comments below. Some notable political figures who have a soft spot for Spam are Margaret Thatcher, who called it a wartime delicacy, and Nikita Khrushchev from the Soviet Union, who admitted that without Spam, we wouldn't have been able to feed our army. In recent history, Spam has become the poster child of processed meat products, a segment of foods that contain controversial ingredients called nitrates and nitrites that are associated with serious illness. With interest in nitrates peaking in 2015, processed meats have become the most hated foods in history by health institutions. But how did we get here? Today we'll explore the history of processed meats, how they fueled human civilization, and why modern health experts say we should avoid them altogether. But before we get into it, if you enjoy content like this, please annihilate the like button and share this video to help boost it with the algorithm. It really helps the channel and lets me know to keep making videos like this one. Now, back to the ham. Spam? We'll start with some words from the late, great Anthony Bourdain.
So much of food is not about freshness. It's what's called that sweet spot, the precise moment in its decay where it is best.
Which brings us to the process of fermentation, the controlled decay of foods. Fermented foods are a global phenomenon. South Korea has kimchi, China has various types of pickled vegetables, Japan has miso, India has yogurt, Southeast Asia has fish sauce, and Europe has a wide array of fermented products from wines and beers to fermented vegetables, but Europe also developed unique processes of fermenting meat. For most of human existence, refrigeration didn't exist, but there was always the need for preserving foods for natural disasters, explorations, or just surviving the winter. But the story of processed meat is more ancient than Europe. For untold millennia, at least 12,000 years, humans have been preserving meat, first by drying it and later on by adding salt to preserve it for longer periods of time. Drying and smoking processes are pretty straightforward. You cut it into thin pieces, leave it out to dry in the sun, or place it over a fire to smoke and dehydrate it. But these techniques pretty much only work in dry climates or if you plan on eating the meat relatively quickly. Drying and smoking would also probably be considered pretty benign to health regulatory bodies today. Europe was uniquely situated to develop mature meat-curing cultures. For starters, it's a bit too humid, and simply smoking or drying meat wouldn't prevent bacterial contamination over long periods of time. Historically, the geography of the Eurasian continent had pastures, grasslands, and grain fields that allowed for the cultivation of crops and livestock. Cold winters in Europe meant that the preservation of foods was essential. In addition to drying grains, legumes, fruits, and vegetables, the process of curing meat became a mainstay of life in ancient Europe, which progressed to the mature cultures of preserving meat that we see in countries like Spain, France, and Germany today. These practices would eventually lead to the bad reputation that salted meats have currently. Early in human history, salt was used by the Sumerians and other Mesopotamian cultures not only to season food, but to tan animal hides to make leather as well. Early evidence of salting meat in these cultures can be found in the ancient Sumerian language with the term mu dulam, which translates to pickled salted meat and dates back to 3000 to 2000 BCE. But the practice of salting meat most likely dates back much longer to 4000 BCE. It's clear that salt was an important commodity even before this though, with the earliest salt mine discovered dating back to 6000 BCE, over 8,000 years ago, in what is now Romania. Almost 3,500 years ago, the Egyptians were also salting meat. Mummified beef ribs were found in the tomb of Tijuyu and her husband Yuya that date back to 1386 to 1349 BCE. King Tut's tomb was also filled with 48 carved wooden cases containing poultry and beef. For Egyptians, meat was important not just during life, but for the journey of the afterlife as well. However, the widespread salting of meat in the Bronze Age wasn't isolated to just ancient Egypt. The most eye-opening discoveries are large-scale meat processing sites that date back as early as 1300 BCE in Hallstatt, Austria. Large salt vats for brining meat were discovered alongside large numbers of animal bones, mostly from pigs, and other artifacts. The size of the vats indicates a production volume much larger than the meat requirements estimated for the local inhabitants, which could indicate trading with neighboring settlements or allowing other settlements to preserve their meat at these sites. This discovery is incredibly interesting in relation to Spam because, if you remember, the founder of Hormel got inspired by Germany's business of canning entire hams, just a stone's throw away from the early meat processing sites in Hallstatt. The importance of cured meat continued in ancient Greece and Rome. The ancient Greeks ate a dish called pterikos, which was meat or fish preserved in salt or by other techniques. And similarly, the Romans had salsamentum, which were salted or pickled meat or fish. During the Roman Empire, as early as 200 to 300 BCE, there are also accounts of the Gauls regularly exporting salted pork to Rome, suggesting a well-established technique for salting and preserving pork, a tradition that would continue until today with the global popularization of French charcuterie. Salted meats also played a crucial role in the Age of Exploration. Conquistadors, explorers, and merchants relied on cured meats on voyages to foreign ports and to the New World. For example, Christopher Columbus included cured meats like Iberico ham from Spain on his voyages. Biltong, a salted meat from South Africa, probably has the strangest folklore origins out of any processed meat. It's thought that at some point in the 1600s, Dutch pioneers placed large strips of meat under their horse saddles. While riding, the combination of repeated pressure from the horse's steps tenderized the meat between the rider and the horse, and sweat from the horse salted and preserved the meat. And, in case you're wondering, yes, horses sweat. In fact, they sweat a lot. Preserving meat through salting was one of the only ways to ensure access to nutrients during the harsh winters in Europe, droughts, failed harvests, or other calamities. But it also provided nutrients for the explorers and conquerors of the New World. The question is, what nutrients are even in cured meat like ham, bacon, beef jerky, or sausage? And what made these meats go from a staple food throughout human history to being shunned by the health community today? Salted red meat like beef, pork, or lamb is a great source of fat and protein, but it also contains essential nutrients like vitamins, minerals, amino acids, and fatty acids. For example, nutrients in beef jerky include calcium, iron, magnesium, phosphorus, potassium, zinc, selenium, vitamin B1, B2, B3, B5, B6, vitamin K2, palmitic acid, stearic acid, as well as the amino acids leucine, taurine, and L-carnitine. It's really a no-brainer that explorers, caravans, sailors, and just normal people trying to get by relied on cured meats for sustenance throughout history. So if salted meats provided so much nutrition to generations of humans, and even vegans today crave them, which is evident by the sheer number of plant-based bacon, deli slices, and sausages in groceries, what made them fall from grace? The answer lies within the word processed. It's not really the ultra-processing of meat that's the problem here. Historically, cured meats contain pretty much 3 or 4 ingredients: meat, salt, potassium nitrates, and/or sodium nitrites. It's thought that natural deposits of sodium chloride, which is table salt, contained small amounts of potassium nitrate or sodium nitrite, and these combinations of salts allowed for the effective preservation of meat throughout history. Salt draws moisture out of the meat, which slows bacterial growth. This means that the meat doesn't readily decay and can be kept in storage for months, years, or possibly decades. The addition of nitrates and nitrites in modern processed meats speeds up the curing process, improves the pink color of the cured meat, and slows the growth of the bacteria that causes botulism, a foodborne illness that can be fatal. And here's where things get interesting for Spam and processed meats as we know them today. The past 50 years or so, nitrates and nitrites have been the topic of debate due to a rodent study conducted at MIT in the 1970s that showed nitrates could be carcinogenic. The catch is that the study was small and it wasn't peer-reviewed. This means that the study wasn't evaluated by other experts to see if the data and testing procedures were accurate. Later on in 1981, the National Academy of Sciences reviewed the scientific literature and found no carcinogenic link to nitrates, but the story gets more hairy. Flash forward to 2015.
Bad news for meat lovers.
It was a sobering day for meat lovers.
Processed meat is carcinogenic to humans.
Meats like sausage, bacon, ham, and hot dogs can cause certain types of cancer.
And increase of cancers of the colorectum.
Classifies processed meat as, quote, carcinogenic to humans.
In 2015, processed meats were classified as a Group 1 carcinogen, the same group as asbestos and smoking cigarettes.
Game over, man. It's game over.
But hold up, let's take a minute to look at the numbers. 22 experts reviewed more than 800 studies to show that eating 50 grams of processed meat a day increased the risk of colorectal cancer by 18%. But how much exactly is an 18% increase in risk? Luckily, this article also has us covered. Quote, "The lifetime risk of someone developing colon cancer is 5%. The increased risk from eating 50 grams of processed meat per day would raise the average lifetime risk to almost 6%. So, wait a minute, I have a question for you. Does this mean that eating 50 grams of processed meat daily increases your total risk of developing colon cancer by less than 1%? And do you think this increased risk outweighs the high nutrient density of cured meat? Let me know in the comments below. Today, grouping all cured meats into the category of, quote, processed meats is misleading. For example, Iberico ham from Spain, which is from a type of domesticated wild boar that eats a ton of acorns, traditionally has 2 ingredients, an Iberico ham leg and sea salt. Although these days it can also contain added potassium nitrate, sodium nitrite, an antioxidant, and sugar. But still, even Spam in the United States, the literal most hated food in history, has 6 ingredients: pork, salt, water, modified potato starch, sugar, and sodium nitrite. But compare these to the actual ultra-processed meat like your basic run-of-the-mill hot dogs, which contain beef or pork, water, salt, sorbitol, corn syrup, hydrolyzed beef stock, potassium lactate, sodium phosphate, flavor, ascorbic acid, sodium diacetate, paprika extract, and sodium nitrite. And just for reference, here's the ingredients list for Spam in Korea. Pork, water, salt, sugar, sodium polyphosphate, sodium pyrophosphate, sodium methanate, starch, carrageenan, vitamin C, and sodium nitrite. So Spam here in South Korea actually is more processed than the normal Spam from the United States. The question here is if the current scientific literature distinguishes between ultra-processed meats that have more than 10 ingredients, including emulsifiers, artificial preservatives, and other additives, and processed meats that contain 3, 4, or 6 ingredients. The answer is that all of these are lumped into the same term, processed meat. If this isn't already making you scratch your head, the story about salted meats becoming one of the most demonized foods of the modern era takes another left turn with the fact that vegetables like celery, spinach, and cabbage contain huge amounts of nitrates. For example, 100 grams of celery contains 261 milligrams of nitrates. 100 grams of lettuce contains 365 milligrams of nitrates. Compare that to 100 grams of bacon, which has 5.5 milligrams of nitrates, and ham, which has less than 1 milligram of nitrates. So why are cured meats considered harmful due to their nitrate and nitrite content, but vegetables aren't? There's still scientific debate about this, but some scientists speculate that the antioxidants present in vegetables help to convert the nitrates to less harmful or even beneficial compounds in the human body. One problem with this hypothesis, though, other than the vast difference in the amount of nitrates in vegetables compared to cured meats, is that meats also contain antioxidants. More research definitely needs to be done, but for now, it's up to us to find out if the nutrients present in cured meats outweigh the potential risks for ourselves in our daily lives. From the days of early civilization to the age of exploration, the widespread reliance on cured meats ended only when refrigeration was adopted in the 1920s. Despite their use of nitrates and nitrites, they're still gaining global popularity today, with charcuterie culture spreading to countries like South Korea. I'm curious what your thoughts are about cured meats. Does the demonization of cured meats make sense? Do you consume cured meats on a regular basis? Do you think they're worth the risk, or do you think they could potentially be safer than their plant-based counterparts like bacon and wheat-based sausages? Do you think that diet, regular exercise, and healthy sleep patterns can mitigate the potential increased risk of disease from cured meats? Do you agree with the demonization of Spam and other processed meats? Let me know in the comments below to continue the conversation. If you learned something new or want to help the channel out, please like this video and share it with a friend. Subscribe and hit the notification bell for more content like this. Thank you so much for watching. Take care.